could be, she could be looked after, and, professionally and be in a safe environment. In fact, it turned out to be the complete opposite.
January 2021, an 88-year-old retired nurse named Anne King was admitted into Reggate Grange, a luxury care home in Surrey, England, that charges up to £8,000 a month, but no amount of money could spare this poor elderly woman who lived with dementia from the disturbing treatments of the nurses, which were caught on camera. Here are some nurses who brutally kill their patients on camera.
Yeah, the DeKalb County grand jury has now indicted 2 nurses and a nursing aide in connection with an elderly veteran's death.
February 2014, 89-year-old James Dempsey, a World War II vet, was recovering at Northeast Atlanta Health and Rehabilitation Center after hip surgery. Now, little did anyone know that he would never return home, as nurses who should have cared for him woefully failed at their jobs. Before working at Northeast Atlanta Health and Rehabilitation, Lois Agaman had pursued a career in nursing after moving to Georgia, and she had received formal training and was licensed to practice as a registered nurse. Mabel Turman, on the other hand, was a certified nursing assistant from College Park. She'd taken up caregiving roles across many facilities before employment at Northeast Atlanta. Both women would take on the responsibilities of caring for vulnerable, elderly patients. February 27, 2014, Dempsey was laying in his room at the rehab center. He'd recently undergone hip surgery and was in recovery, with his family expecting him to return home soon. Instead, hidden cameras would later reveal the final, painful hours of his life. A camera secretly installed by Dempsey's family due to prior concerns about his care captured his desperate cries for help. He repeatedly pressed the call button up to 6 times, complaining of chest pain and difficulty breathing. The footage shows Nurse Lois entering his room. Rather than helping this poor man, she dismissed his condition and instructed him to stop pressing the button, claiming there was nothing wrong. She then left the room. Later, at some point, a nursing assistant noticed Dempsey was unresponsive. Lois returned, but didn't begin CPR. Instead, she left for over an hour to confirm whether Dempsey had a do not resuscitate order on file. And when she found out that he had requested life-saving measures in the event of a crisis, she still failed to act. The hidden camera would capture other disturbing moments. Eggman, alongside nursing supervisor Wanda Knuckles, struggled with an oxygen machine. Instead of focusing on resuscitation, the 2 women would laugh as they tried and failed to get the equipment working. The video shows both nurses don't make any meaningful effort to save Dempsey's life until paramedics arrive at the scene. Only then do they perform CPR, and by this time, it's already far too late. 2017. This investigation by 11 Alive News brought the footage to light, triggering public outrage. By 2018, a grand jury had indicted Lois Eggman for felony murder. Mabel Turman and Wanda Knuckles were indicted for concealing the death and neglect of an elderly person. The footage was so crucial that, without it,
we would not be able to prosecute this case without that video.
The legal proceedings dragged on for years. That was mainly because defense attorneys tried to block the footage from being used, claiming it violated privacy laws. However, in 2020, the Georgia Supreme Court ruled that the video was admissible. The ruling also established a precedent allowing families to place hidden cameras in nursing home rooms in Georgia. 2022. Eggman pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter, neglect, and concealing a death. Through a plea deal, she would get 8 years in prison, avoiding a potential life sentence. Prosecutors argued she knowingly allowed a man to die without providing help. Meanwhile, though, Mabel Turman was sentenced to 5 years probation after pleading guilty to similar charges. She admitted to changing a pillowcase instead of calling for help, while the victim lay unresponsive. In addition, Wanda Knuckles, the supervising nurse on duty, was later sentenced to 1 year in prison for concealing Dempsey's death. Following this, all 3 women surrendered their nursing licenses. In the years following Dempsey's death, nursing home care across Georgia came under renewed scrutiny. It prompted lawmakers and elder rights advocates to push for more transparency and surveillance within long-term care facilities.
collapsing, throwing up and begging for his life, saying he cannot breathe. Shows video of an Atlanta man just hours before he died while in police custody with nurses standing by.
Annalene Visser began her nursing career after relocating from South Africa, where she'd once worked in hospice care. She later moved to Georgia, where she pursued a position as a correctional nurse. By 2019, she's serving as a nursing supervisor at Cobb County Adult Detention Center. She had a very important role for the medical needs of inmates, but in the case of one detainee, her decisions led to devastating consequences. September 29, 2019, Kebell Wingo, a 32-year-old father of 3, was detained at Cobb County on drug possession, and Wingo started complaining of severe abdominal pain shortly after his arrival. His condition quickly deteriorated. Surveillance video from inside the jail showed Wingo collapsing many times, visibly sweating and screaming in agony. A deputy eventually wheeled him into the infirmary because he was unable to walk. Several members of the medical staff believed he was in serious medical distress. A nurse named Natalie Chance described him as being on the floor, screaming that he was in pain and unable to breathe. According to her, it was clear that Wingo was suffering from abdominal pain. She stated plainly,
I think there was something wrong with him because, like, the sweats and stuff is just like something you can't fake.
Despite that, Visser refused to authorize any form of treatment. Lab technician Tiffany Womack, who was a trained emergency medical technician, would ask for permission to take Wingo's vitals, and Visser denied the request. Instead of checking his heart rate, blood pressure, or respiratory condition, Visser concluded that Wingo was faking his illness. She dismissed his cries as attention-seeking behavior and called his collapse the show of the day. Jail cameras even caught her looking into Wingo in his cell as he was groaning in pain. The only thing she did was tell jail deputies to place Wingo in an isolation room away from the medical unit, and once in isolation, Wingo collapsed yet again. This time, he never got back up. Medical examiners later confirmed that he died from a perforated ulcer, a condition that causes stomach acid to leak into the abdominal cavity. It's both excruciating and fatal if not treated. The autopsy further revealed no drugs in his system, disproving any theory that his behavior was drug-induced. According to medical professionals who later reviewed the footage and case details, basic medical interventions such as checking vitals or transferring him to a hospital could have saved his life. Now, following his death, Wingo's family filed a complaint with the Georgia Board of Nursing. His daughter, Kiara Wingo, was baffled by the nurse's failure to respond to clear distress signs.
She don't know because she never checked, but she don't know because she never did what she was supposed to do. We would have just did her job, we wouldn't be here.
The family would urge the board to revoke Visser's license. Their complaint triggered an investigation into her actions during Wingo's detention and subsequent death. Now, during that process, more disturbing details came to light. A video-recorded deposition captured Visser doubling down on her original claims. Even after being informed that Wingo had died from a serious medical condition, she maintained that he'd pretended to be dead and acted out to get transported to a hospital. She expresses no remorse and insisted that she would not have acted any differently if given another chance.
I think he was acting out. All along he was acting out, wanting to go to the hospital. And if they'll do anything to go, and he would do anything to go, even if it means picking him off the floor.
Despite the amount of video evidence and testimonies from fellow medical staff, the disciplinary outcome was minimal. In June 2023, an administrative law judge recommended that Visser serve only 1 year of probation. The Georgia Board of Nursing accepted that recommendation without reviewing the deposition video. They did not modify nor challenge that decision, which left Wingo's family in disbelief. They had alerted the board to the existence of that deposition and requested that they delay a decision until they could consider it, but no effort was made to obtain or review that footage. Investigators who viewed that jail surveillance footage concluded that Wingo did not exhibit any disruptive behavior. They disagreed with Visser's claims that he'd been too rowdy for treatment. Other nurses and technicians at this facility testified that he was genuinely in pain, not acting. Yet for some sick reason, none of these accounts changed the board's final decision. Welcome to Cobb County. Following Wingo's death, Visser was fired from her position at the detention center. Wingo's family later settled with the jail's former medical provider, Sheriff Craig Owens, who assumed office after the incident, acknowledged the suffering of Wingo's family, but did distance his administration from the events. Annalene Visser's actions shocked healthcare professionals who reviewed this case. Elaine Harris, a retired nursing professor of over 4 decades of experience, saw that this case was deeply concerning. Harris stated a simple 5-minute evaluation could have revealed Wingo's dangerously low blood pressure and high heart rate, which are clear indicators of a perforated ulcer. She points out the board's decision showed a lack of understanding about the seriousness of Visser's failure.
They would have seen this nurse's utter lack of compassion, her utter lack of care. I can't envision her in any other practice setting and being considered a safe practitioner.
Despite this, Visser's still out there practicing nursing in the state of Georgia. June 28, 2016, Brittany Denai Johnson, a licensed vocational nurse, was working a shift at Bi-State Justice Center in Texarkana, Texas, when 20-year-old inmate Morgan Angerbauer began complaining that her blood sugar was dangerously high. Now, Johnson, 27 years old at the time, was the nurse responsible for Angerbauer's care. Despite being stationed just 20 feet from the medical observation cell where Angerbauer was detained, Johnson refused repeated requests to check the inmate's glucose level. You see, Angerbauer was known to be a type 1 diabetic, and when she got to the jail, her blood sugar was so high that it exceeded the scale of the testing device. She was given 15 units of insulin. The next day, her glucose remained dangerously elevated at 487 mg/dl, prompting another dose of insulin. Now, later readings showed a brief return to normal levels, but no follow-ups were ever conducted to confirm the stability of her condition. That same evening, on June 30th, Angerbauer tells Johnson that she again is feeling unwell and requested a glucose check. Johnson said no, telling her it wasn't up to the inmates to decide when they get the treatment. Surveillance would pick up that Angerbauer spent hours banging on her cell door, screaming, asking for help. Despite that, Johnson still declined to check on her condition. Many inmates were witnesses to her worsening state, but their observations were also ignored. Angerbauer eventually collapsed on the floor of her cell and lay there, unconscious and surrounded by her own vomit. When trustees finally called for assistance, Johnson then attempted to test her blood sugar. The glucometer displayed an E-3 error, indicating a blood sugar level too high to register. However, rather than administering insulin, Johnson gives Angerbauer glucose, raises her blood sugar further, and then she enters into an emergency state. By the time ER services are summoned, it's too late. In fact, emergency services weren't called until more than 40 minutes after the initial signs of unconsciousness. July 1st, 2016. Angerbauer's pronounced dead shortly after 4 a.m. The Arkansas medical examiner later confirmed that the cause of death was diabetic ketoacidosis, a complication that arises when insulin is absent in the body for too long and acid builds up in the bloodstream. The autopsy confirmed that there was no physical trauma that could have contributed to her death, and a state crime lab recorded Angerbauer's final blood sugar level as 813 mg/dl, more than 7 times the upper limit of normal. Johnson's arrested and charged with negligent homicide. Authorities stated that she was fully aware of the severity of Angerbauer's condition and had admitted that she denied care because it wasn't protocol for inmates to request medical testing outside scheduled times. Jail staff testified that one officer urged Johnson to call for help when Angerbauer appeared unresponsive, but again she refused for more than 30 minutes. September 2016, a federal civil rights lawsuit was filed by Angerbauer's estate against LaSalle Corrections and various staff, including Johnson. LaSalle Corrections denied all wrongdoing and attempted to have the case dismissed, arguing that Angerbauer's own conduct, including alleged drug use, contributed to her death. The court, however, ruled that the factual disputes would be resolved at trial. In May 2017, the civil case filed by Angerbauer's estate progressed as LaSalle Corrections appointed a new administrator. By the end of that year, both parties reached a settlement agreement resolving the case for $200,000 to avoid any further emotional strain on the family. Meanwhile, in August 2017, prosecutors upgraded Nurse Brittany Johnson's charge to felony manslaughter after reviewing new evidence and surveillance footage. However, just 2 months later, Johnson accepts a plea deal and pled guilty to misdemeanor negligent homicide. She's then given 6 months in Miller County Jail with 90 days suspended. The Texas Board of Nursing takes her license and she's barred from reapplying for a year. Can't make this up. During sentencing, Angerbauer's mother, Jennifer Hauser, gave an emotional victim impact statement. She had to describe the pain of watching her daughter's final moments on surveillance video while being ignored by medical staff until it was too late.
A California mom is in shock after turning on her nanny cam to see her 2-year-old with special needs being abused by his nurse.
Helpless and screaming. The video allegedly shows Landon Coe repeatedly pinched, slapped, even hit with a rolled-up magazine.
April 2017. Diana and Christopher Coe leave their Redondo Beach, California home to attend their older son's basketball tournament, leaving their son, Landon Coe, in the care of a nurse provided by Maxim Healthcare Services. Unknown to them, a disturbing incident would soon occur that would change their lives forever. Landon Coe wasn't an ordinary toddler. He's born with Rubinstein-Tabby syndrome, a rare genetic disorder that caused severe developmental delays, blindness in one eye, limited mobility, nonverbal communication, and reliance on a feeding tube. He required constant supervision and specialized medical care. The Coe family had hired Maxim to provide that support, and the nurse assigned to them was Thelma Manalastas. So while at the tournament, Diana Coe opens the nanny cam application on her phone to check on Landon, and what she saw shocked her. The video showed Manalastas physically assaulting her disabled son. She can be seen repeatedly pinching, slapping, and roughly handling Landon. At one point, she rolls up a magazine and, like a dog, she strikes the toddler. The nurse was captured on video pushing Landon forcefully into a seat and continuing to treat him with aggression while he screamed helplessly.
We were like, what do we do? What do we do? It was such a panic mode.
Disgusted and horrified by what they're watching, Diana and her husband, Chris, immediately called 911. Now, they're about 20 minutes from their home, but they rush back while monitoring this abuse live on the nanny cam. Police respond quickly to the call and arrest Manalastas at the scene. This disturbing footage captured by the nanny cam served as the primary evidence. Manalastas was later charged with 2 misdemeanor counts of child abuse. Following the incident, Maxim Healthcare Services terminated Manalastas' employment and reported her to the California Board of Nursing. The company also acknowledged that it had launched an internal investigation upon learning of that incident and promised full cooperation with law enforcement. However, the Coe family later filed a lawsuit against both Manalastas and Maxim, claiming negligence and failure to protect their child. According to their allegations, Maxim failed to perform a proper background check on Manalastas before assigning her to care for a medically fragile child. Although, thank God, Landon survived the abuse without immediate life-threatening injuries, the family alleged that he developed complications that required one of his eyes to be surgically removed. Unfortunately, a more tragic development soon came. April 24th, 2018. A year after the assault, Landon Coe passed away. His death occurred during the ongoing litigation, and his estate became a formal part of the legal proceedings. The Coe family claims that the injuries from the abuse contributed to his worsening health, and as a result, the legal case expanded. The lawsuit alleged battery, assault, and negligence on behalf of Landon's estate, along with claims of negligent infliction of emotional distress on behalf of the parents, or NIED. The Coe family argues that they had witnessed the abuse in real time through that nanny cam, which should qualify as a direct emotional trauma under California law. Initially, the trial court dismissed the NIED claim, stating parents were not physically present at the scene. The Coe family, however, argues that their real-time observation of the abuse through live video streaming should be treated as equivalent to physical presence. With this argument, the court agreed, recognizing that modern technology had changed the definition of presence in such cases. The decision becomes a notable development in California case law involving emotional distress in the digital age. In the end, Manalastas pled not guilty during her first court appearance and was released on bond. Prosecutors, however, requested restrictions to prevent her from being anywhere near children under the age of 10, though the judge limited the order to children under 5. As of her court hearing, she'd not entered a plea deal to the child abuse charges, and the case remains under review. November 2020, the trial court gave a judgment in favor of Manalastas and Maxim on some claims, but parts of the case stayed open for more proceedings. Nevertheless, the Coe family continues to seek justice for their son, whose short life was marred by abuse, despite his condition requiring compassion and care.
A 19-year-old Pasco County man is facing charges after surveillance video showed the man beating an elderly person he was supposed to be taking care of.
In August 2020, home surveillance in Hillsborough County, Florida, captures disturbing footage of a young nurse employed as a caregiver physically abusing an elderly patient in his care. The nurse, identified as 19-year-old Jonah Delgado, had been hired to provide full-time in-home assistance to this 88-year-old man who was unable to care for himself. The victim, whose name hasn't been made public, required round-the-clock help with basic daily needs. He'd been brought home from an assisted living facility by his son due to safety concerns during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the victim's son also installed a surveillance camera in the elderly man's room to monitor his movements for safety. However, what he discovered instead was horrifying. August 5th, 2020. Disturbing footage shows Delgado engaging in physical and verbal abuse against this frail man. At the start of the recording, Delgado seen placing this elderly patient into a wheelchair and then slaps him in the face, strikes him in his head and stomach, and shouts profanity towards him. At one point, the victim becomes entangled in Delgado's earphone cords, prompting another round of slaps and insults. Delgado can be heard yelling obscenities, calling this man derogatory names, and ordering him to move. The abuse continues as Delgado violently drags this elderly man from the wheelchair and shoves him onto the bed. He punches him in the stomach 3 times, and throughout this ordeal, he maintains an aggressive tone, showing no signs of concern for this man's well-being. After seeing the footage, the victim's son contacted local authorities immediately. Detectives within the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office would work quickly to obtain an arrest warrant for Delgado. With assistance from the Pasco County Sheriff's Office, Delgado was taken into custody later that night, charged with multiple offenses, including and abuse of an elderly or disabled adult. Following that arrest, Hillsborough County Sheriff Chad Chronister condemned Delgado's actions, emphasizing that he had not only failed in his responsibilities, but had put this poor elderly man in danger. Detectives later described the actions as
despicable, deplorable, indefensible.
The man, unable to defend himself, remained passive during repeated attacks. August 25, 2021, Delgado appeared in a virtual court hearing before Hillsborough Circuit Judge Laura Ward. By then, Delgado pled guilty to 3 third-degree felonies, including 2 counts of elder abuse and 1 count of a victim over 65. As part of a plea deal, Delgado was given 2 years of house arrest and 4 years of probation. In addition, he's permanently barred from any future employment as a caregiver. He's required to attend anger management classes, complete 200 hours of community service, and write a formal letter of apology to the victim. During the hearing, Delgado addressed the court and apologized to the victim's son, acknowledging the harm he'd caused. The court accepts the plea and issues sentencing terms that would keep him under supervised conditions for the next several years. While the victim's physical condition following that assault wasn't fully disclosed, this incident shows the vulnerability of elderly patients and the potential risks when caregivers fail to uphold their duties. So in response to this incident, experts advised families to request background checks, conduct interviews with references, and consider installing some cameras in their houses to ensure the safety of their loved ones. The quick thinking of his son and the surveillance camera played a crucial role in uncovering the abuse and bringing the perpetrator to justice.
Oh, don't do that.
We were looking to put her in somewhere that could be, she could be looked after and, professionally and be in a safe environment. In fact, it turned out to be the complete opposite.
January 2021, Ann King, an 88-year-old retired nurse living with dementia, was admitted to Reggate Grange, a luxury care home in Surrey, England. However, no one expected what was captured on camera, installed by one of her children. The care home Ann lived in was operated by Signature Senior Living, and it charged up to £8,000 a month, one of the most expensive in the country. So Ann King's children, Richard Last and Claire Miller, thought that their mother was going to get the highest standard of care. I mean, that's a lot of money. However, as the months would pass, they grew increasingly concerned about her condition and the treatment she was receiving at the home's dementia floor. So by autumn 2021, Richard decided to install a hidden camera on Ann's bedside table to observe how staff were caring for her, and the footage he collected would reveal a series of shocking abuses. This poor woman was regularly mocked, shouted at, and handled roughly by care workers. She was left in distress, frightened, with no one responding for her cries of help. In one clip, she's left lying on the floor for nearly 50 minutes when she asked in confusion. A male staff member crouched near her face and harshly responded. While she's in bed, a camera captures a male custodian attacking her with a rag used to clean toilets. He then threatened to dump a trash bin on her and make obscene sexual gestures towards her face. Staff were also flickering the lights in her room, deliberately confusing her as she tried to understand her surroundings. These acts were repeated and carried out by different individuals on staff, some of whom were responsible for her well-being.
I broke. I totally broke because obviously it's full sound, it's full picture. I could hear Mum screaming, you know, and it broke me.
Despite the clear evidence of mistreatment, the initial response from authorities was minimal, and that's because the Crown Prosecution Service states that there's not enough evidence to prosecute anyone. Oh, Ann King's children were stunned by that decision, especially after they provided hours of that disturbing footage. In March 2022, Ann King is removed from Reggate Grange by her children. 7 months later, in October 2022, she sadly passes away. Her family believes the trauma and maltreatment she endured at the care home significantly contributed to her decline. September 22, 2023, nearly a year after the death of Ann King, the Care Quality Commission confirmed that a criminal investigation had been launched into the treatment of Ann King at Reggate Grange. The CQC stated that the investigation would focus on whether the care home and its management failed to provide safe treatment, and if unqualified staff were employed in violation of care regulations. So in addition to that, the manager of Reggate Grange at the time of the abuse was later transferred to another facility, and all the staff involved in Ann's care were no longer employed. So their answer to prevent similar incidents was to introduce new safety monitoring options for dementia patients, now allowing families to install surveillance cameras in private rooms because they don't even trust their staff. These recordings, though, are reviewed by third-party experts, whatever that means, and families are allowed to access the footage at any time. Ann King's abuse was not isolated. ITV News later showed that over 1,000 allegations of abuse or neglect were recorded in care homes across the country in just the previous year, with just 1% resulting in criminal charges. Advocacy groups and campaigners have since demanded new laws to improve oversight and to make safety monitoring mandatory in all care facilities, especially for residents who can't report abuse themselves. Guys, to this day, no one has been prosecuted for the abuse shown in the videos. The criminal investigation into Reggate Grange remains open, and the Care Quality Commission hasn't yet made a final decision on enforcement action. However, the footage captured by Richard Last continues to serve as disturbing evidence of the failures within the care system.